All right, guys, welcome back. I know it's been long awaited for me too. Just been really busy with work and whatnot, but we're gonna go ahead and get started on this 427. Um, I got it back from the machine shop, and I wasn't gonna use it right away, so I'm gonna show you some of the techniques that I use to, number one, preserve the block from rust, and two, prepare it for paint and assembly. So let's get to it. All right, guys, we're going to start work on the 427 here. As you can see, I have the block on the stand. And when I got it back from the machine shop, they had already washed it. They did a really good job with everything. But as you can tell, I have a slick sheen on it. And I sprayed this stuff on. It's called fluid film. Guys, I highly recommend this stuff. If you're going to have a block laying around and you're not going to use it for a while, I would not recommend bagging it up. I know that's a common practice. The reason I don't recommend bagging these blocks up, or any block in particular that's bare cast iron, is because if the atmosphere has a lot of humidity in it, you're trapping the humidity in the bag, which traps moisture droplets, which starts the rust. I prefer to leave them out in the open and spray this fluid film. It's kind of expensive. It's about $10 a can, but it definitely works. But what we're going to do here is spray off using brake clean and some other stuff all of the fluid film that's on here, all the protective coating. That will give us a nice bare cast iron platform to start masking off and prepping for paint. All right, guys, we're back. Kind of ran out of time yesterday, got a little late, but I continued cleaning off the fluid film off the block, and we're moving right along. One thing I will say on these dart blocks, if you notice, now keep in mind we're prepping for paint. What I'm going to do is lay the head gasket that I'm going to use on either side, and if you'll notice, the decks are rather wide on the cylinders. I say the decks, the sidewalls. So they protrude from the head, they extend past the head. A lot of people just kind of mask the whole deck off, but that will be exposed about a 1/4 inch. So I'm going to lay the gasket on and take a Sharpie, and we're going to use the line as, or the gasket for a line to paint over that part of the deck, so that way we don't have any rust. I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, guys, here we are. So here's the gasket on the deck of the block. I'm just going to go ahead and score my line with a Sharpie. That way I know where to spray to. Of course, I'm going to put masking tape, painter's tape, to block everything up. But let's continue. All right, everyone. Well, we got this block masked off. It's ready for primer. It's the front of it. Takes time to mask everything off and take a razor blade and cut around the edges, but the end result is very nice. Done a couple of these, and just like everything else, you take your time with it. It'll be just right. Let me flip it over. So as you can tell, what I was talking about earlier, the cylinder walls extend on these dart blocks, just like on the Man of Wars and whatnot. And I'll just go ahead and paint the leftovers, the extensions anyway, so that they don't rust. But this one's ready for primer. And then after that, we'll tap the freeze plugs in. But here we go, guys. Let's spray this thing. Here's what I'm going to prime it with: the Duplicolor engine enamel. It's got ceramic in it. Here's the part number. You can find this at the local parts stores, but this line of paints right here is perfect for engine blocks. So I think it's good up to 500 degrees. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and shake this up and spray it. Alright guys, just applied the last coat of primer. Turned out pretty well. I'm going to let this dry for a couple hours and spray the final coat. I'm actually going to go with a cast iron color, so it's going to look just like it did before. I just love the look of cast iron. It's always been my favorite. Black is nice, gray is nice. I, for one, just like the cast iron look. Let me flip it over so you guys can get a better view. So again, it's about 3 coats of primer. Let this dry, let it set up, and we'll come back and spray the cast iron coat. Alright guys, it's been about 30 to 40 minutes, and according to the instructions, you want to spray your actual paint on the primer within the hour of spraying your final coat of the primer. So anyways, here it is. If y'all can see this, it's cast iron with ceramic, same line of paint. I'm going to shake it up really well, and we're going to spray it. Alright guys, final coat of paint has been applied. Took about 3 coats to get it nicely covered. So now it looks pretty much the way it did before we started, but it's just painted cast iron. So it's still drying. It'll dry to a more of a matte finish. I'll flip it over, let you guys see. I think it turned out pretty well. Like I said, it's still drying. It'll dry very uniform. Alright guys, so when you buy a dart block, you have to buy the parts kit. You don't have to, you can piece all this stuff together, but they sell a kit. I think it's, I don't know, around $100, but it gives you all the appropriate pipe fittings and also freeze plugs. They use brass, and there's somewhat of a debate out there which freeze plugs are the best to use, brass or steel. I think most people go with the brass. The debate is longevity. Brass obviously does not rust, and steel does over time. It takes a while for it to do it. The benefit to the brass is it doesn't rust. The benefit to steel, though, is they sit in the bores a lot tighter than brass. Brass is very soft. Of course, you want to use sealant when you knock these in, but I've always chosen the deep steel seats. This is a PC85 plug. It's generic 1.5 inch. That's what I'm going to use. I've used it on all my engines in the past. Brass, because it's softer, I haven't seen them pop out. I've heard stories of them popping out, just like the people who love brass have heard of the steel ones rusting out. So pick your flavor. I'm going to go ahead and use the steel. They are galvanized coated, but they're a very thick wall, and they're a very deep well plug. So, and they're going to seat a lot tighter in the bore, which I'm going to choose that as my benefit. The plugs that come in the kit, we're still going to use those, the dowels and whatnot, and obviously the head dowels and whatnot. But anyways, let's go ahead and start knocking these in. One thing I want to mention is before you tap these plugs in, a few people, you know, depending on who you are, some people like to use silicone on the bores of the block to tap these plugs in, like a gray silicone, which is actually pretty good stuff for other purposes. My preference is aviation forma gasket sealant. It's very thick stuff. It's very nasty. It stinks, but it definitely seals. It's over the years, it's what I've found is the best for any kind of freeze plug. So what I'm going to do is take a Q-tip and I'm going to insert it, and this is what I'm going to use to apply the sealant to the bore of each freeze plug. I don't know if you guys can see, but I've dressed the wall of the bore with the aviation sealant. And I'm actually just going to rest this cup in here, just like so. And we're going to get the appropriate socket, not that sits inside the cup, but sits on the outside wall. I think it's 1 1/8. But let me go get the socket, and we'll start driving this thing in. 1 1/8 is what's going to grab the outside wall of this cup. And then you just want to take a really heavy, I think a 24-ounce ball peen hammer, and knock this thing in square. That's very important you do this square. So obviously I can't hold the camera, and my pedestal isn't really set up right now, but you guys get the idea. You want to tap this thing in straight, and I'll show you how far I knock them in. All right, guys, there's one done. Pretty self-explanatory. I think, like I said, it's a 24-ounce ball peen hammer, 1 1/8 socket, and drive it in square. And I just go right below the surface. You can go a little deeper if you want. I may go a little deeper, but anyways, you get the idea. So let's do the rest of them. Guys, it's done. All the freeze plugs, with the exception of the rear coolant freeze plugs, are popped in. I'll just probably put those in once the motor's ready to go in the car. So that won't be for a while, obviously, but you get the idea. Plugs are in, and she's ready to be unmasked. So let's go ahead and peel the masking tape off. And here we are, guys. Took off all the masking tape. That's what we're left with. I think she turned out pretty decent. You can tell the difference in the cast iron paint versus inside. Of course, you know, that didn't get painted, but it's pretty close. So next step, next video, probably what I'm going to do is blow this thing out really well, blow out all the passages, and get it ready for assembly. But yeah, guys, this is how I prep all my blocks. You know, like I said earlier, when you get it back from the machine shop, definitely invest in that fluid film if you're not going to use it. You know, if you're not going to use the block soon, or if it's going to be in a humid environment. And do not bag them. It will trap the condensation, and you will have a rust bucket in no time. Just leave it out in the open, you know, to the air with the fluid film, and it'll be fine. So here we go, guys. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next video.